Welcome to Spectral Shadows, where the darkness whispers and the unseen lurks. Tell me, where are you watching from, and what time is it? Because horror feels different at night, especially when you're alone. Those who love their mother, like, share, and comment. Subscribe, if you dare. Now turn off the lights, and let's begin. Story number 1. I worked for the FBI, and this is the investigation that cost me everything. I wish I could say that this case is classified. I wish I could say I could get in trouble for publicizing it. It would then mean that there was information about the case left. Information that needed to be protected. Information that could protect people. On June 11th, we received a call to investigate a missing persons case. A woman by the name of Willow Craig. She disappeared. She's just gone. I don't. The husband, Michael Craig, stammered desperately on the phone. The 911 operator tried their best to call him down and tell them what happened, but Michael only repeated that Willow disappeared. Me and my partner, Valerie, were immediately dispatched to investigate. Talking with a confused and grieving family is difficult. One of the most difficult things you can do as a detective or otherwise. Me and Valerie did our best to console Michael and his and Willow's children, Nathan and Sarah. We asked them rudimentary questions like when they saw her last, if they had any idea where she might have gone. This line of questioning seemed to agitate the family, and they clarified repeatedly that Willow wasn't missing. She disappeared. When Valerie asked them what they meant, they showed us something incredibly bizarre. Willow was no longer in any of the family photos, not removed from them like it was edited. Rather, it was as if there was never a person there to begin with. Pictures of the family grouped together now had a noticeable empty space. Some with Michael awkwardly wrapping his arm around nothing. It got even stranger when they showed us family videos without her in them at all. Videos of the husband and children talking and laughing with nobody. Them paying attention to an empty chair, an empty towel at the beach, a car being driven by itself. A particularly unnerving example was a video of the two kids when they were younger, running through the sprinkler. The family claimed that Willow was the one holding the camera, and sure enough, you could see the shadows of everyone there, except for the person recording. Just the shadow of the camera floating in midair. Me and Valerie watched Michael's wedding video in utter perplexity as his father-in-law walked nobody down the aisle, read his vows to nobody, and stood teary-eyed and lovingly smiling across from nothing. He walked down the aisle, hand in hand with hollow air, as everyone cheered. The most bizarre video by far was the videos Michael took of his wife in the hospital, about to have their firstborn. Michael and the nurses conversed with an empty hospital bed. A slimy red baby materialized in the nurse's hands out of thin air. The newborn floated above the hospital bed, being cradled by a non-existent mother. It didn't end there, though. All of her personal belongings and documents remained, but they were devoid of any evidence they had ever belonged to someone. All of her clothes looked brand new. Dresses and pants, Michael said she's worn for years now, seemed like they had never been worn at all. They even still had tags on them. They showed us her driver's license, birth certificate, credit card, and any type of physical documents that might mention her. As you'd expect, it was all erased. They showed us her social media profile, an account with no username linked to an email that just read, "Add email." They showed us more, and it all followed the same frightening theme. Willow Grace has disappeared entirely. Me and Valerie were at a loss for words. She gave me a frightened look that said, "What do we do?" We told the family the best thing we could do was start a search party. All we needed was a physical description of Willow and the place they last saw her. "I last saw Willow," Michael began. He froze. I don't remember." "What about you kids? Do you know where you last saw Mom?" Valerie asked Nathan and Sarah. Before the kids could open their mouths, Michael interrupted. "I don't remember what she looks like," he shouted in fear. "You're serious?" I asked. However strange all the evidence we'd been shown so far, a husband not remembering even a single detail of his wife's appearance was the most unbelievable. "Her hair is long," Nathan said with uncertainty. "I remember I would brush it, but I don't remember what it looked like. Whenever I try to remember what Mom looks like, it's like trying to think of a new color. My brain won't let me." Sarah chimed in. I was dumbfounded. The three people closest to her in this woman's life can't even remember even so much as her hair color. I felt awful about it, but there wasn't much me nor Valerie could do. We assured the family we'd find her, and returned to the Bureau with what we discovered. To make a long story short, the investigation went absolutely nowhere. All the extended family members, co-workers we questioned had a similarly difficult time describing her appearance. She supposedly worked at a pharmacy. Her co-workers and boss remember her name, but couldn't for the life of them describe her personality or appearance. As we suspected, all camera footage of her place of work contained odd moments of customers being rang up and given medication by nobody. On July 9th, after only a few weeks since her disappearance, the Bureau decided that it was a fruitless effort. We can do a lot of things, but we can't find someone who seemingly never existed. All we had was the word of the people who knew her, and a series of unsettling photos and videos. I felt bad about leaving that poor family with nothing, no leads or hope that Willow would be found, or if she could even be found. However, I would be lying if I said that the reason this case kept me up at night was purely because of sorrow. Curiosity gnawed at my bones like a colony of termites. What on earth happened to that woman? Did she ever even exist? I had to know. Couldn't use the Bureau's resources, and I didn't know where to even begin from where we left the investigation. I took a day off and decided to go back to Craig's. I wanted to try to search for something, anything we might have missed. As I drove to the house, I mulled over everything about the case. Why had the people who knew her forget practically everything about her, yet still remembered her name and relationship to her? When interviewed about this, Sarah said something along the lines of, "It's like a tugging at my heart. I just know." I personally haven't met with the Craigs since the beginning of the investigation, and I strained to think of their pained expressions, their choked words, My heart sank into my stomach as I recalled the investigation. I realized that when I tried to place the Craigs' appearances in my mind, I blanked. I remembered their names, Their words, but not their expressions, their voices, or their appearance. I accelerated my car, going past the speed limit to reach Craig's house as soon as possible. The feeling of your memory of something fading is indescribable. I don't remember what the videos we watched looked like, but I remember writing them down and the feeling they gave me. I pulled up to the house. It was late in the afternoon and the lights of the house were all off. I hurriedly walked to the front door and rang the doorbell. "Mr. Craig? Michael?" I shouted. Dead silence. I rang the doorbell again and again. I didn't hear voices nor footsteps. Nothing. I was chilled to the bone. Had they disappeared too? Maybe I could see if someone or something took them. I kicked at the door. It didn't budge at all. I felt flustered for even thinking I had the gumption to kick it down. I went around to the window and smashed it in with a stone. It was a rather secluded suburban neighborhood in the afternoon, so nobody really noticed. I crawled through the window and into the kitchen and noticed immediately that something was off. The smell of the house was clean, too clean. Every home has a certain smell to it. The people who live there imprint their very presence on the atmosphere, making the home feel lived in. This house felt hollow, though there were objects around that implied people lived there. They were uncannily neat, like a movie set. I walked to the living room and turned on the light. My heart began racing as soon as I processed what I was seeing. The living room was full of odd-framed photos, consisting of simple landscapes or empty rooms, not a person in them. "Michael," I shouted. The only response was my own echoed voice. I climbed the stairs and entered the master bedroom. The bed was made. The carpet was spotless. Everything was perfect. I searched the closet. The neatly assorted clothes of Michael now perfectly matched the clothes of his wife, untouched, unworn. I went out into the living room and spotted the USB that contained the family videos. What unsettled me is that the devices, TV remotes, and cables were all neatly placed on the floor, still wrapped, like they had never been used. I was already convinced that the same thing that happened to Willow happened to Michael, Nathan, and Sarah. But I needed to see the videos again to make sure. After grabbing the USB, I heard a loud thud. I was used to the dead silence and jumped from the sudden noise. It came from downstairs. "Who's there?" I shouted. I immediately heard scampering. "Hey!" I yelled. I rushed down the stairs, the scampering noise immediately ceasing as soon as I was on the first floor. "Who's here? I heard you!" I hollered, scanning the dining room and kitchen. I widened my eyes when I looked down the hallway opposite of the kitchen. At the end of the hall, a door was opened that wasn't open when I entered. I cautiously approached the door and was greeted with a dark and foreboding staircase down into the basement. I don't know what compelled me to venture down. Maybe it was the knowledge that I would get charged with breaking and entering. Maybe it was the guilt and curiosity that plagued me. I flipped the light switch at the top of the stairs, and the light didn't turn on, which was odd, because it worked the last time I was here. I guess I would have to use my phone flashlight. The once dusty old basement was now cold and clinical, devoid of life. I scanned the basement, surveying the storage boxes, no doubt full of untouched items. I turned around to look under the stairs when I spotted something hairy out of the corner of my eye. When my flashlight scanned up at the wall, my heart nearly rocketed out of my body. Clinging to the basement wall was an enormous, hairy, red tarantula. When I say enormous, I'm talking at least 3 meters long, taking up the entire wall. I stood in frozen silence for a few moments. Then my shock slowly died down. The tarantula didn't move, so my rational brain assumed that it was just a prop or decoration for Halloween. Jesus Christ, I said, breathing a heavy sigh of relief. Then it twitched. Thump, thump, thump. The sound of its many legs adjusting its position on the wall caused vibration through the whole room. My face went pale. There was no way. There is no way that thing is real, I frantically thought. Then it rushed across the wall, scampering impossibly fast. Thump, thump, thump. It climbed away from my light and into the darkness of the basement. "Fuck!" I screamed, fully processing that the tarantula was a real, living thing. I frantically ran up the basement steps, down the hall, and bashed open the front door. I got in my car and started breathing heavily. I wanted to drive home. I wanted to drive far away and never go near that house again. But I hesitated. I sat in the car for a while, thinking about what had just happened. What on earth was that thing? Is it related to Willow's disappearance? I opened my glove box and eyed the revolver stashed within. I bit my lip and grabbed it. My curiosity overpowered my fear, and I stepped out of the car and walked back up to the house. To my shock, the front door was closed and locked again, even though I just came out. I walked around to the window I had broken, only to find that the glass was completely repaired. "The fuck?" I whispered. I didn't care to question it too much, given the amount of crazy shit that's happened so far. I broke the window for a second time and crawled in. Sweat dripped down my neck when I approached the basement door. I froze in place when I heard the familiar thumping of the beast's movement down below. I took a deep breath and slowly crept down the stairs, revolver in one hand and flashlight in the other. Thump, thump, thump. I jumped back in surprise when the giant tarantula crawled into view, now on the floor. I didn't want to fire my weapon if I didn't need to. I simply stared at the massive creature with a mixture of fear and astonishment. It was then that I heard the worst sound I could possibly hear. Thump, thump, thump. The crawling noise of the massive tarantula. Only the one in front of me wasn't moving. The noise was coming from the hall behind me. I whipped around and was immediately met with a second, equally huge, equally terrifying tarantula speeding down the stairs after me. I'm not proud of the noise my vocal cords produced at that moment. I didn't think a scream that loud was even possible for me to make. I didn't even think to use my gun. I just stood there in pure terror. The tarantula ran into me head first, its large, hairy body slamming into my chest and knocking me down the stairs. I landed on my back. The wind was knocked out of me, and I dropped my phone, though I retained a strong grip onto my gun. I didn't have time to think before both of the massive tarantulas surrounded me. I felt their disgusting hairy legs scratch at my skin, yelped as they pummeled their many legs repeatedly into my stomach, head, legs, and arms. I desperately tried crawling away, only to feel their massive, powerful legs press down on my back, pinning me to the ground. The feeling of these revolting creatures touching me with sharp hairs and beating me with their strong limbs was unbearable. I screamed in agony when I felt both of the tarantulas nuzzle my back before plunging their fangs deep into my flesh. I felt venom inject into my body, and I started to go numb almost immediately. Hot saliva dribbled out of my mouth. I felt like throwing up. I grit my teeth and focused, tightening my loosened grip on the gun. I haphazardly pointed it back and shot. I don't think I hit them, but it clearly surprised them as they finally left me alone and scampered away. "God! Fuck!" I screamed. The pain was unbearable. I could feel the venom coursing through my veins. I thought for sure I would die. I sat up and scanned the basement. The two tarantulas had scampered into a corner of the room. I aimed my gun and shot at both of them. They frantically crawled to the other side of the room as I shot. Hairs flew off as a few shots made contact with their body. The bullets didn't seem to affect them, and I already ran out. I gathered my strength and stood up. I wobbled and nearly fell over, as I couldn't feel my legs. I need to get out of here now. I went to grab my phone. Thank God it landed flashlight side up. I clumsily walked to the stairs and began to climb up. But as I climbed, I saw the tarantulas doing something odd. In trying to escape me, they huddled to a corner of the room and began to move a heavy wardrobe up against the wall. My mouth fell open when I watched them push the wardrobe aside, revealing a massive hole in the wall. The two beasts crawled into the hole and even managed to pull the wardrobe back into place. I didn't have time to think about the oddly intelligent and dangerous monsters escaping. I needed to get to a hospital. Aching and weak, I dragged myself up the stairs and stumbled down the hall. When I reached the outside door, I immediately collapsed in the front yard. I could barely keep my eyes open. The venom made my head spin, and I eventually passed out. I woke up in the hospital, shocked that I was still alive. The pain and numbness still rang through my body, but not enough to keep me from moving. I was about to get up when a nurse entered the room. "Oh, you're finally awake," the nurse greeted me. She came over and picked up a clipboard. "So, you were found passed out in front of an abandoned house. You had a lot of bruises and 4 stab wounds." The nurse began. I cut her off. "Abandoned? No, it belongs to Craig's," I informed her. "The Craigs?" the nurse asked. "You know, like Willow Craig, the missing woman," I answered. The nurse didn't seem to know what I was talking about. Whatever. Where's my phone?" I asked. The nurse pointed to the table next to me, and there was my phone, wallet, and clothes, neatly folded. I needed to call the bureau. I needed to tell them what I found, that the rest of the Craigs went missing. I rose out of bed, and the nurse stopped me. "You need to lay down, sir. You haven't recovered from your injuries, and we haven't fully identified your condition," the nurse pleaded. I paused. "What do you mean you haven't fully identified it?" I inquired. The nurse looked at my back wounds and soured her face. "Well, we haven't seen anything like it," she answered. I examined myself. I was covered in bruises from the brutal beating of the tarantulas. Some sharp red hairs still stuck in my skin. I twisted around and looked at my back. Though they were bandaged up, I could tell the bite wounds were gruesome. "Look, I need to call the bureau. Hand me my phone at least," I requested. The nurse handed me my phone, and I immediately felt something off. The phone felt brand new, and when I turned it on, I nearly fainted. My phone wallpaper was a photo of me and my brother posing while on a hiking trip. I was no longer in the photo. I jumped out of bed in a panic. No. This can't be happening. The nurse urged me to stop, but I stormed past her. I grabbed my clothes and wallet and ran to the bathroom, locking the door behind me. I quickly dialed my partner, Valerie. In a panic, I couldn't think of who else to call. "Mark?" she answered. I felt relieved that, like Willow, at least my name remained in people's memory. "Valerie, I'm vanishing like Willow Craig. I need you to type out everything I say. We need to reopen the Willow Craig case. The rest of the Craigs went missing, and I hurriedly spoke before Valerie interrupted me. "Whoa, slow down. What are you talking about? Who's Willow Craig? I don't think I was a part of that case," she stated. My eyes widened. "What do you mean? You were on the case with me," I responded. Valerie went silent. "Mark, I don't remember any case I've done with you, even though I know I have. She stammered. "I can't even remember your face. What's going on?" "Listen to me, Valerie. You can only remember my name and general aspects about me. It's the same thing that happened to Willow Craig," I reiterated. "I told you already, I don't know any case about Willow Craig. I just searched our records and couldn't find anything." Valerie notes. "What? That doesn't make any sense. I stopped. I realized at that moment what was happening. I dropped my phone and ran out of the bathroom. I barged past the nurses and sprinted down the halls, ran from the hospital and fell to my knees outside. Valerie didn't remember Willow Craig's name. Her case file wasn't in our records anymore. She'd been completely erased. It didn't matter that they remembered my name. They'd eventually forget that, too, and any record of it would be wiped away. I write this from a public restroom. Not that it matters, since this document will probably disappear as well. Those spiders, monsters, whatever they were, I feel their venom running through me. It stings. It scratches under my skin. I realize that the red hairs in my arms aren't stabbing into them, but growing out of them. I can feel my skin scraping against my bones and reshaping my body. My arms and legs are lengthening, my teeth and fingernails are falling out. I don't know how much time I have left. I don't how, and I don't know why, but I'm sure those tarantulas were Willow and Michael Craig. Their identity and any evidence of it was erased from existence. I can only assume that included their poor children. I'm even beginning to forget their names. I had to scroll up on my own writing to remind myself. Hell, I forgot my own name a while ago. I called myself Mark earlier. I don't know if that's my name. It just sounds right. Willow, Michael, Nathan, Sarah. I'm so sorry. I suspect there's more of them. More people who underwent this transformation and became lost to the world. I suspect there's many friends and loved ones out there who were wiped from the minds of everyone around them. Oh God. I can feel my insides shifting, my bones break and my blood gushing inside. It hurts so much. 4 new limbs slowly began growing out of my torso. Writing this to you all is my final desperate action. Though it may be impossible, please remember me. I don't expect anyone to go down there to try and find a way to put a stop to it. I don't know if you even can. I'm going to lose myself with so many unanswered questions, but I do know one thing. I know what happened to Willow Craig, and it's about to happen to me. Story number 2. It was supposed to be an easy part-time delivery job. I would make a few extra bucks, help pay my rent, pay down some credit card debt. But for a job delivering food, things went from mundane to dangerous, remarkably fast. I worked very early morning hours in a warehouse and would get off work fairly early in the day. I had not planned on getting a second job at all. The pay was decent, but when my roommate left me high and dry to move in with his girlfriend without notice, I was left in a financial lurch. That was when I decided to look for an easy part-time delivery job to get into. It wound up being DoorDash or Uber, and I figured I would rather deliver food than people, so I signed up. When I started, the pay was not great. I suppose when you decide your own hours, it can get messy. I thought it would work around my other job's schedule, so it was the best I could do. Honestly, if that was the only problem, it would have been fine. But the customers, now that is where it gets disturbing. I know a lot of delivery drivers deal with weird folks, but when food is involved, it makes most people even more intolerable. Most customers are fine, but the people I have been working with for the last few weeks, well, let's just say if I make the wrong move now, things might get bad. Very bad, now that I know what I know. I have been at this for a month now, and the first 2 weeks delivering had been uneventful, draining and tedious, but uneventful. I live in a fairly small town, so there was not a lot of deliveries available on the average night. Though, with how small it was, I was surprised how many people would still use the app for delivery. I was lucky in that sense, and it seemed like barely any other people were delivering here. With no competition, I got a decent number of deliveries at first, though most of the people were on the older side and lousy tippers, regardless of how the service was. I was still struggling and starting to get disheartened. I thought I might need a different job to help cover the gap and pay my rent until I could get a new roommate. Then I accepted a delivery that changed it all. It was a delivery to a small retirement home near the outskirts of town. I was not expecting much, since many of the older clients were stingy and demanding, so I went to retrieve the order. Most of the deliveries I made were from the few restaurants we had in town, as well as some fast food places that were close. This delivery was from a curious little Greek place that had just opened up a month earlier. It was called Phagis and served some classic Greek food with a twist. From the ratings I had seen, it was pretty popular so far. I figured I was going to be getting a lot more orders from this place. I arrived as soon as I could to the small restaurant. It was a fairly dingy building. Not much polish had been put into the grand opening, and I was surprised by the state it was in. I walked past the sign and saw a name in Greek on the sign in smaller font, Phagos. Then in larger font, the name of the restaurant, Phagis. I stepped inside and heard the ringing of a smell bell. I waited for someone to come to the counter and looked around a bit. The dining area was very small, and no customers were currently there. Inside, the place did look nice and tidy. The decor was not bad either, and the vibe seemed right for the type of restaurant it seemed like. I saw they even had a lot of classical paintings on the walls, and I admired the effort put into making it look good. Though the Goya of Saturn or Kronos in Greek, eating his children on the wall was a bit off-putting. especially considering it was right by what looked like the kitchen. For having just opened, I was surprised it was not as busy inside, but I guess if people were grabbing to-go orders, it was more work for me, so I wouldn't complain. As I looked around, the pervasive smell struck me. I like Greek food, but nothing in there smelled like that. It had a sickly sweet aroma. It was just odd enough where I could not decide if it smelled appealing or disgusting. And the few other scents I noted, I could not quite describe at all. My musings were cut short when a small woman emerged from the kitchen and locked eyes on me. She looked ancient and weathered, but the gleam in her eyes possessed an energy that belied her age. She was scrutinizing me as I approached, and I suddenly felt a disturbing sensation. Before the awkward silence lingered any longer, she suddenly smiled and greeted me. "Are you the driver?" I nodded my head and she looked thrilled. Yes, good. My name is Anthropos, but my friends just call me Annie. Welcome. I am so glad you will be working with us. Please let me get you something for the trouble before you head out. She was already moving past me to grab some items from the counter, and I tried to tell her not to worry, and I had to go. But she would not hear it. In a few minutes, she had made me a tasty little flatbread snack and was crooning over me like a protective mother figure. "Thank you so much, ma'am. But I do need to head out with that delivery." She nodded her head and smiled and placed her hand to her head. "Oh yes, of course. I am sorry. I just love to serve people. It should be ready now. You wait here, and I will go get it." I sat on the small bench by the front door to wait. In another moment, she was back, holding a large box that almost tottered out of her grip. I rushed over to help her, and she thanked me again. "Now this is a special order for you take to our friends at the retirement home. Talk to Demos. He will take the delivery. Only give the box to Demos. Do not leave it there unless he is there to take it." She handed me the large box, and when I hefted it, I was amazed that she could carry it. It felt like it weighed almost 100 pounds. She was beaming at me and followed me to the door to open it. I thanked her and tried to return the smile through the strain of handling the box. I nodded my head and left back outside to get to my truck. She seemed very nice, but something about the entire place seemed a bit off. I had never delivered such a giant order of food before, and it was strange it was in a crate that looked more in common with the freight I moved in my day job than it did a food delivery. The smell was strange, too. Not bad, but it was that same sweet smell from before. I felt like it was just off enough to make it less appealing, like it had too much of one ingredient to cover something else up. I supposed it did not matter, and I went on my way to make the delivery. My destination was the Pickman's Green Retirement Home. It was nice from what I had seen of the outside, but I had never been in personally. I was already dreading the more onerous customers who would be upset by some problem with the food and just give next to nothing for a tip. But I moved on, and in about 10 minutes, I was there. I arrived in good time and rang the bell at the reception desk. I waited for a response, but nothing came. I was about to leave the food there, but I remembered my instructions and waited. Eventually, a nurse emerged from an office in the back. She moved towards me, and I saw her name was Nancy. She was very pretty, and I smiled at her when she regarded me. "Good evening. Visiting hours are over now, but is there something else I can help you with? I returned the greeting and gestured to the box I had set down nearby. Yes, please. I am looking for Demos. I am supposed to drop this food off for him and hopefully, however many folks he is going to share with. I chuckled at the notion of one person getting the giant crate of food. But instead of relaxing, the woman stared at me for a moment with a nervous look in her eyes. Demos, yes. One moment, I will get him. I waited around until an older man emerged the back. He looked angry and stared at me for a moment before regarding the nurse. This is him. You said he was asking for me. The young nurse nodded and looked concerned. The situation felt weirdly tense for a simple delivery, and I was not sure what to say. He looked back at me, then the crate, and scowled. I just decided to declare myself. Yes, I have your DoorDash delivery, Annie at Vegas said to give it directly to you, and not just leave it. I watched his reaction, and he looked weirdly mistrustful. Eventually, he just nodded his head and brushed past me. To my surprise, he effortlessly hefted the box up and left. He had not acknowledged me at all. I called out to him, "What about?" The nurse stepped in front of me and had a very fake smile plastered on her face. "Here is your tip. Thank you again." I took the small envelope she had handed me, and I was about to ask if they needed anything else before she told me to leave, since they would be locking up for the night. I thought it was odd, but I did not want to stay there any longer than I had to anyway. I left the building and went back to my car. As I sat down, I figured I would see how they managed to shortchange me. They had selected the cash tip option, and I had a feeling that in this case, somehow it would screw me over. That Demos guy looked like a real bastard, and I figured it might not be cash at all, but an angry note. It turned out I was wrong. Not only was it cash, but the envelope held $800. I had to do a double take and recount it, but it was the same amount again. I had no idea why the hell they had given me so much money, though I did see a small piece of paper mixed in with the stack of $100 bills. I unfolded it and was confused by what it said. "Take this, and do not come back. Do not take any more delivery jobs here for your sake." I thought it was so strange. Someone was warning me not to do any more deliveries for them by giving me a bunch of cash as a tip. If anything, it was even more incentive to do so. But I did wonder why someone would put it there. I was foolish enough to believe at the time that it was because someone else might want to be saving those deliveries to get the huge tips for themselves. I wish that had been why. Against the advice of the odd warning, I did respond to the next delivery for Pickman's Green that I saw. It was another order from Vegas, and when I arrived, Annie was there again and greeted me like a long-lost child. She was a little too friendly and pinched my cheeks, saying I was not eating enough and that I was all skin and bones and that she needed to fatten me up. As cute as the doting grandmother act was, I was mostly there for the huge payday from those jobs. Each time I had made a delivery to the retirement home, I made a cash tip of around $800. For that, I would deal with a little embarrassment from the restaurant owner. That night when I made my deliveries, there were 2 boxes, and I needed to take them in one at a time. I waited by the reception desk to be let in, but instead of the younger, pretty nurse, Nancy, There was a young man I hadn't seen before, had deep bags under his eyes and looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. He saw me struggling with the boxes and did not move to help, just stood there and said, "Delivery?" I nodded my head and grunted, struggling with another large crate that felt like it had a whole cow inside. After the boxes were inside, the young man moved to take them, but I stepped in. "Actually, I am only supposed to leave that with Demos. Could you go get him?" The man glared at me, and I shrunk back involuntarily, as if I had offended him by asking. I reiterated, "My instructions are to only leave the delivery with Demos. I'm sorry." The man glowered at me another moment and flatly stated, "He is not here right now." I was not sure how to respond. I did not know why they would not have told me. I wondered if I should just leave the food with this nurse instead, but the way he was acting felt off. I was about to agree when the door opened and Demos walked in. When the nurse saw him, they broke into an argument in a language I did not recognize. The tone sounded off, though, like it was too guttural. It did not sound like Greek or any other dialect I could place, but whatever they were talking about, it sounded like an argument. That I had no idea what they were saying. I was getting uncomfortable waiting for them to stop fighting so I could get my tip. But then Demo struck the other man after he gestured at me and drew a finger across his throat. I did not like the situation and I ran, leaving the box with them and just trying to get the hell out of there. I was not sure what set them off, but I felt like I was a moment away from being attacked. I decided to ignore the orders for the retirement home for a while. I had saved a good deal of money, and it would get me by for a little bit. It was just last night that I was convinced to come back and make my most recent delivery. I had received a direct phone call from Annie at Fagus. I was not sure how she had gotten my number, but she was asking me to make a big delivery for a catering event at Pickman's Green. She said she would pay me $2,000 plus tip if I would go. Despite what had happened last time I delivered for them, I couldn't turn down the crazy payday, so I agreed to go. I arrived early at the restaurant and stepped inside. The place felt oddly cold, like no one had been cooking for a while. I shouted into the back, announcing myself, "Hello," but no one answered. I looked around and saw the light seemed oddly dim as well. It seemed like they had closed early for something. Eventually, Annie emerged from the back room. She smiled as she saw me, but the dim light and the bags under her eyes gave her face an unfortunately hideous quality that I wouldn't dare mention to her directly. I shrunk back a bit involuntarily. Despite her ghoulish countenance, she seemed elated that I was there. "Oh my, there you are. Come in, come in. We have the delivery already. We are so grateful you are helping us serve all of those people there." She ushered me toward the kitchen, and when I stepped in, I was shocked to see the gigantic crate that was waiting for me. I looked at her and had to protest. "I'm sorry, I don't even think I could lift this without a forklift, ma'am. This looks like a month worth of food. How are they going to use so much? And why is it in this type of industrial crate?" She brushed off my words and was unconcerned. "Oh, don't worry about that. It may be heavy, but my sons will help you carry it out, and Demos can help you when you get there. It is not just one meal, but a large portion of our fresh specialty. It needs to be kept safe. It is our restaurant's entire body of work." She smiled again, but I was unsure. I noticed that 2 teenage boys had entered the room at some point. Annie spoke to them in a language I couldn't recognize. I was fairly sure it was not Greek, either. It unnerved me, since it sounded more like the men arguing at Pickman's Green that night. The 2 boys turned to me and then stood on one side of the giant crate, and I got the hint. Annie bid us goodbye and good luck, and said she had another one to get started on. I hefted the other side of the crate, and it was incredibly heavy, at least 200 pounds. We managed to make it to my truck, huffing and puffing, and I had to strap it down and secure it before I could get going. The 2 boys watched me wordlessly as I worked, not offering to help, but not interfering. The silent treatment was awkward, and I considered trying to make small talk, but I decided against it and just left, giving them a small wave. As I drove to Pickman's Green, I considered how strange this delivery was. This was not even on record with the app or company. She had called me directly, and now I was hauling this freight-sized box of food to the already suspicious folks at that shady retirement home. As I was considering the situation, I heard a loud banging noise from the back of the truck. I panicked at first and thought I might have hit something. Then I realized I might not have tied it down correctly, and the box might have shifted or gotten banged up by something. I looked back and did not see it shifting, but I wanted to make sure before continuing, in case it did get loose and fall out. I turned off the engine and stepped out. Almost in unison with my door closing, I heard another thump coming from the back. It made me jump, and this time I knew it had been from the box. But to my concern, it was not shifting. I was not even moving anymore. How could it be making noise? I inched closer, suddenly concerned by the silence all around me on the almost deserted highway at dusk. I waited for another few minutes, anxiously expecting something to happen, and it was quiet. A car drove past me, breaking the absolute stillness of the situation, but no noises from the box. Eventually, I decided it was my imagination, and I got back in the truck and continued on my way. I arrived at Pickman's Green, and as I stepped out, I thought I heard another sound, like a hard exhalation of breath from someone. I looked around and saw I was still alone, but the situation was disturbing me. I rushed inside to hopefully find Demos and get this over with. Inside, I saw he was waiting near reception where the nurses would normally be. The permanent scowl still etched on his face. As soon as I walked in, he left the desk and just brushed past me, bumping into my shoulder and just walking past me. I thought I even heard him mutter something under his breath. I walked with him as we went to my truck. He stopped and turned around and demanded, "Open the back and let's get this over with." I did as he instructed, not wanting to spend any more time with him than I had to. As I was undoing the straps, I caught him subtly taking a picture of my license plate with his phone. Before I could say anything, he turned to me and asked, "How is it coming?" I decided to just answer him instead of asking about his weird behavior. "It's all set. Let's get it inside. Do you have a dolly or something?" He frowned at me and pointed to the building. "It's barely a short walk. Come on, use your back." His smile was worse than his frown, and he showed me a toothy grin with hideously brown, almost needle-like teeth. I just nodded my head and bent down to get ready to lift. We raised the giant crate out of the flatbed and started moving. I was trying to back up with it, but the angle was off when we tried to turn, and I told him I needed to set it down. He ignored me, saying, "We are almost there," and he kept going. My fingers started slipping, and I told him I needed to put it down again until eventually it slipped, and the box crashed down to the ground on my side. Demos shouted what was likely a curse in whatever his native language was, and bent down to inspect the box. My face was red, and I was embarrassed, despite the fact that he had not been listening to me. Before I had time to concern myself with his rebuke, my heart froze when I heard a distinct knocking sound, and it was coming from inside the box. The knocking sounded again, and I thought I heard a muffled cry. I froze, looking at the box and hearing the sound, then looking at Demos, as if to confirm he heard it too. Then the angry look on his face vanished, and he flashed a horrid grin and reached into his coat pocket. He pulled out an envelope and handed it to me. On second thought, I will take it from here and get Seth to help me bring this the rest of the way in. He whistled loudly, and the young man from before showed up, running to meet us. He turned back to me. "Don't trouble yourself with this or any other burdens you might have. It's not your problem anymore. You take this and buy yourself something nice, all right, my friend? Drive safe and give my regards to Anthropo and her restaurant." He continued grinning at me as he pressed the envelope into my hand and turned back to the box. Both men hefted the giant crate, and as they lifted it, I heard the banging sound increase in volume and tempo. The last thing I heard as they carried it inside was something that sounded like the word help. I left in a horrified daze. I was not sure if I should call the police or just go home and hide. I know what I heard. I did not see anything, but I am not crazy. Something was in there, or worse, someone. The more I thought about it, the worse the situation felt. I did not know if it was some weird human trafficking business I had gotten roped into. But I couldn't figure out why they had me delivering those smaller boxes first. I thought about Annie, and how she had seemed so nice, but so insistent I work for her. I was afraid she knew more about me than I thought. She had found my number, and worse, maybe she knew where I lived. Honestly, I do not know if I should be telling anyone about this now, for that matter, but when more of the pieces came together, the real danger has become clear, and I fear something terrible might happen. Something I have to warn people about. The final revelation came to me when I started to question the true nature of the mysterious restaurant and their client at Pickman's Green. I stumbled upon it while researching a bit about Annie and the restaurant. I found out very little about her or her history directly, though it was in piecing together her name and the restaurant on a notepad, where I realized the horror had been hiding in plain sight the entire time. I knew she had introduced herself as Anthropo, or Annie for short. Then I considered her restaurant's name, Fagus. I put the two together on my note, and the morbid implications were too much to bear. Annie's restaurant, Anthropo's restaurant, Annie's Fagus, Anthropo's Fagus, Anthropophagus. The word sounded familiar. I looked up the definition. I think I know what was really in that box now, and I am never making a delivery there again. Story number 3. I found a weird photo in a book that I bought at a thrift store. I was thinking of posting this to Ars or Found Photos, but I don't actually have the original photo anymore, so they'd remove my post. I'll try to describe everything as best I can. A week ago, I bought a copy of The Shining at our local thrift shop. When I got home, I realized there was a photo stuck in roughly the middle of the book. When I first looked at the photo, it looked fairly normal. A blonde woman and a dark-haired man with their arms around each other, standing in the middle of a room. Judging by the woman's poofy hairstyle, the floral wallpaper, and the poor quality of the photo, it was probably taken sometime in the 80s or 90s. I ended up using the photo as a bookmark, and that's when I started noticing some really off things about it. For one, there was another woman sitting on the couch behind the couple, but her face was blurry, too blurry to be just chalked up to the quality of the photo. Maybe she'd been in motion, shaking her head or something. But it didn't really look like a motion blur. It looked more like a smudge. And there was a hand on the woman's shoulder that looked too small and slender to be the man's hand. I didn't think too much of it. But the next day when I opened the book, well, this is going to sound crazy, but I swear the picture looked like it changed. The blurry face woman seemed to have two darker areas on her face where her eyes should be. Empty sockets. Behind the couple, there was something coming down from the ceiling. Two blurry, oblong, dark shapes. I guess I just missed those the first time. But the next time I opened the book, it changed again. The couple's smiles were so broad, they were almost uncanny. Their pupils were so big, their eyes almost looked black. The blurry-faced woman in the background was looking up at the ceiling, and those blurry, oblong shapes. They were legs, dark pants, men's shiny black shoes dangling from the ceiling. I slammed the book shut. I didn't want to see anymore. I closed my eyes and rocked back and forth. I'm not crazy. The photo must have always looked that way. I just didn't look closely. It's a prank. It's a horror book after all. Some teenager must have generated a creepy AI photo and stuck it in. Or maybe they even stuck in multiple photos, and I'm getting confused which is which. I knew there was only one photo in the book, but my excuses helped, because I couldn't accept that the photo was changing. I tore up the photo and threw it in the trash. But the next morning, the photo was sitting on the middle of my kitchen table, and it was definitely different. The couple's eyes were pure black. Their grins stretched impossibly wide. The woman in the background was screaming, and the hanging man's legs were more in view. I could see up to his belt. The photo fluttered in my hands as I shook. No. Creak. I was staring at the photo, but in my peripheral vision, I could see two oblong dark shapes hanging from my ceiling, slowly swinging back and forth. Thump. It, whatever it was, fell to the floor. I scrambled out of the kitchen and ran for the door. As I ran through the living room, I saw a woman in the corner of my eye, sitting on the couch, mouth open impossibly wide, screaming. I grabbed the doorknob. Something clawed at my arm, but I burst out into the front yard and continued running. I didn't turn back until I was at the road. Just barely. I could make out the shape of two people standing in the shadows of the doorway, a man and a woman, with black eyes. I looked down at my arm, the 4 scratch marks pooling blood. The next day I visited a little library, shaking. I stuck the copy of The Shining inside, the photo neatly tucked in. My arm was purpled with bruises, and the scratches had turned an awful, necrotizing black. I didn't want to curse anyone else, but I also didn't want to die. So I'd scrawled on the title page of the book, "Pass it on." You survived, for now, but the shadows aren't done with you yet. If this story gave you chills, like the video, share it with someone who dares to watch and comment your thoughts, especially if you're watching in the dark. Subscribe to Spectral Shadows, where fear never sleeps, and the next nightmare is always waiting. We'll be watching.